I'd been sleeping in my taxi for 3 months when a man in a $3,000 suit climbed into my back seat, looked me in the eye, and stopped breathing. He didn't ask for the airport. Instead, he asked me why I had his dead brother's face. I didn't have an answer. You see, 25 years ago, my life started on the side of a highway with a shattered skull and no name. Today, the mystery of who I am just walked into my cab, and he's holding a photo that shouldn't exist. So, 3 months is a long time. It's a long time to measure your existence by the millimeter of a reclining driver's seat. It's long enough for the lukewarm temperature of gas station coffee to become the only heat you know. I was at rock bottom, though rock bottom implies a solid floor. This felt more like a slow-motion freefall through a dark, oily cloud. I was homeless. I was broke. I was living on whatever crumpled bills and sticky coins I could scrape together from the center console. Honestly, the morning I picked up Logan, I'd been awake since 4 a.m. I was parked outside the airport in the pre-dawn gloom. I sat there, watching the blue-tinted runway lights flicker through a windshield filmed with grime. I hadn't had the energy to scrub it off. My back was a roadmap of knots. My breath tasted like stale caffeine and defeat. I'd made maybe $30 in fares, barely enough to replenish the gas tank and buy a breakfast sandwich that tasted like cardboard. Anyway, 6 months ago, I had a life that looked good on paper. We're talking the American dream. A 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, a lawn I spent my weekends manicuring, a wife who knew how to smile perfectly for every Christmas card, 2 kids who still thought their dad was a superhero. I was managing a small construction company. It paid the mortgage, the car notes, even the occasional impulsive vacation. I wasn't a millionaire, but I was stable. I was someone people respected at the grocery store. Then, the floor gave way. It happened in the space of 14 days. Our biggest client defaulted on a massive payment. It was a catastrophic financial domino effect. I never saw it coming. I had to stand in front of 12 men guys who'd been with me since the beginning and tell them they were out of a job. Then I had to walk to the front door, turn the deadbolt for the last time, and hand the keys to a bank representative who wouldn't even look me in the eye. 20 years of sweat and late nights evaporated into a stack of legal documents. My wife, Jessica, she handled the news with the grace of a Category 5 hurricane. "How could you not see this coming?" she demanded. She was pacing our kitchen. Her heels clicked like gunfire against the hardwood floors I'd installed myself. "How could you be so careless with our future, Ezra?" I tried to explain the economics. I tried to explain how the client had cooked the books, but Jessica had already moved past the why and straight into the goodbye. Within a week, she'd packed the kids into the SUV and moved back to her mother's. Watching Ella and Ricky carry their favorite stuffed animals out to the driveway, it broke something inside me. Something that hasn't quite healed yet. "I can't do this anymore," Jessica said. Her voice was flat, cold. "The kids need stability. You're 42 years old with no degree and a failed business. Who's going to hire you?" She wasn't being mean. She was being honest. And that was 1,000 times worse. The house went into foreclosure. I moved into a studio apartment that smelled like decades of chain smoking and cheap pine sol. When the unemployment ran out and the dead-end interviews stopped calling back, the studio went too. That's how I ended up in the Crown Victoria. It was an old, mustard-colored relic, 200,000 miles on the clock, a passenger seat held together by duct tape and prayers. It was my office. It was my bedroom. It was my only lifeline. I learned how to become invisible. There's a specific way people look times through times a taxi driver, especially one with a scraggly beard and wrinkled clothes. I showered at truck stops. I scrubbed myself with industrial soap under flickering fluorescent lights. I just wanted to maintain enough dignity so the passengers wouldn't complain. I was a reminder of how quickly a life can crumble. I was a ghost in the machinery of the city. Anyway, The call for the Marriott downtown came in just as the sun started to bleed over the horizon. The Marriott was the kind of place I used to stay at for trade shows, back when I wore tailored shirts instead of shirts I'd washed in a sink. I pulled up to the valet stand. I felt the weight of the luxury cars surrounding my beat-up mustard bucket. Honestly, I felt like a stray dog at a dog show. The passenger was waiting by the curb. He was checking an expensive-looking watch, mid-40s, a suit that probably cost more than my car. He had that posture, that confidence, that only comes from never having to check your bank balance before buying lunch. He slid into the back seat. Suddenly, the smell of expensive cologne and cedarwood filled the cab. It completely masked the scent of the cheap gas station air freshener hanging from my mirror. "Airport?" I asked. My voice was a bit raspy from disuse. "Actually, change of plans," he said. "Take me to 1500 Market Street, please." I pulled away from the curb. I glanced in the rearview mirror to check the lane. That's when I saw him. He wasn't looking at his phone anymore. He was staring at the back of my head. Then, at my eyes in the mirror, his face was draining of color. He looked like he'd been carved out of marble. "Is everything okay?" I asked. A prickle of paranoia crawled up my spine. Maybe I looked more homeless than I thought. Maybe he was going to report me. He didn't answer for a long 5 seconds. He just kept staring. His eyes were wide, trembling. Then, he leaned forward. He gripped the top of the passenger seat until his knuckles turned white. "I'm sorry," he whispered. His voice was cracking. "This is gonna sound strange, but what's your name?" "Ezra," I said. I tried to keep my hands steady on the wheel. Just Ezra. His face went even paler, a ghostly, sickly white. He looked like he was about to vomit or faint. "Look, if you're uncomfortable, I can call another cab," I added. I reached for the radio. No, it's not that," he stammered. His breath was hitching in his chest. "It's just, you look exactly like someone I used to know. The resemblance, it's uncanny." So, I'd heard that before, usually from some lady at a grocery store checkout or a random guy at a construction site. People always said I had one of those faces. One of those universal templates that makes everyone think they went to high school with you. I usually just nodded. I'd offer a tight smile and wait for the moment to pass. I just wanted to go back to being a ghost. But this guy? He wasn't just passing the time. His intensity was a physical weight in the back of the cab. He was vibrating with a kind of energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Yeah, I get that a lot," I said. I kept my eyes locked on the gray asphalt. I tried to ignore the way my heart was starting to thud against my ribs. Universal face, I guess? It's a curse. The man didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He leaned further into my space. The scent of his expensive cologne clashed with the stale smell of the gas station taquitos I'd eaten for dinner. "What's your last name?" he asked. His voice was barely a whisper, like he was afraid the answer might shatter the air between us. I hesitated. My fingers tightened on the cracked plastic of the steering wheel. "I don't know," I said. The words felt heavy. They fell into the footwell like lead. It was a truth I usually kept buried. But there was something about the raw desperation in his eyes that bypassed my defenses. I watched the car drift slightly toward the rumble strip. I jerked the wheel back. My palms were slick with a sudden, cold sweat. "You don't know your own last name?" he asked. I could hear the sheer disbelief in his voice. The light ahead turned a defiant shade of red. I brought the Crown Vic to a shuddering halt. I finally gathered the nerve to turn around in my seat. The springs groaned under my weight. I looked him dead in the eye. I noticed his expensive silk tie was slightly crooked. "I was in an accident 25 years ago," I told him. My voice was flat. Head injury. Massive trauma. I lost most of my memories before that day. It was like someone hit the factory reset button on my brain. I watched his throat move as he swallowed hard. His eyes scanned every inch of my face. The scar on my chin, the way my left eyebrow sits a little lower than the right. "The hospital called me John Doe," I continued. I felt that old, familiar hollow ache in my chest. When I got out, I had to be someone. I chose Ezra because I liked the sound of it. It felt right. Like an old song you can't quite remember the lyrics to. He looked like I'd just told him I was a time traveler. His mouth opened, then closed. 25 years ago, he repeated. His voice was shaking so hard I thought he might break down right there on my duct-taped upholstery. How old were you then? 17, according to the doctors, I said. I shifted my weight. Why? Are you a private eye or something? The light turned green, but I didn't move. A chorus of impatient horns erupted behind us. The typical city symphony of, "Get out of my way." But neither of us heard them. We were trapped in a bubble of silence. "My brother," he said. The words were so quiet I had to strain to hear them. My younger brother disappeared exactly 25 years ago. He was 17. Honestly, a cold needle of this can't be happening pricked at my brain. I stared at him. My mind was racing through 1,000 scenarios. Was this some elaborate, cruel social experiment? And you? I asked. My voice was cracking. He shook his head. A single tear traced a path through his expensive skin. You look exactly like him, he whispered. Exactly like he would look now. The jawline, the eyes. It's like looking at a ghost that grew up. I finally gave in to the pressure of the cars behind me. I pulled through the intersection. My hands were shaking so violently I had to grip the wheel with everything I had. This was the kind of stuff that happens in movies. The kind of long-lost sibling trope that felt too cheap for a daytime soap opera. That's quite a coincidence, I managed to say. My mouth felt like it was full of dry cotton. Is it? He leaned forward again. His face was inches from the plastic partition. Think about it, Ezra. What do you remember about the accident? Anything. A color. A sound. A smell. I closed my eyes for a split second. I tried to reach back into the void. Into that thick black curtain. Not much, I admitted. The familiar frustration was bubbling up. I was found on the side of a highway, about 50 miles outside the city. No ID, no wallet, no cell phone. Nothing but the clothes on my back and a skull fracture that should have killed me. I remembered the antiseptic smell of the charity ward, the pitying looks from the nurses who called me Johnny. The police figured I was a runaway, I said. My voice was hardening. Maybe a hitchhiker who met the wrong person. The head trauma? It wiped the slate clean. I woke up a blank page. 50 miles outside the city, he repeated. His voice took on a haunted quality. That's the same highway my brother was traveling on. When he vanished into thin air. I pulled the taxi over to the curb. The tires scraped against the concrete with a harsh screech. I put the car in park and killed the engine. The sudden silence in the cabin felt heavier than the noise. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm. Look, Mr. Westfield. I started. I read the name off the reservation tag on his briefcase. Logan, he corrected me. Logan Westfield. Mr. Westfield, I said. My voice was rising. I think you're reaching. I really do. I mean, what are the actual odds? This is a big city. People go missing every day. People look like other people. He didn't argue. He just looked at me with a terrifyingly calm expression. My brother's name was Ezra, he said quietly. The name hit me like a physical blow to the gut. I watched the blood drain from my head. A dizzying wave of vertigo washed over me. I'd spent 25 years thinking I'd plucked that name out of thin air. I thought I'd built myself from scratch. What did you say? I whispered. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Ezra Westfield, he said. His voice was gaining strength. He was 17. He was a drummer. He hated broccoli and loved old sci-fi movies. And he had your eyes. I leaned back against the door. The cold glass of the window pressed against my temple. My brain was trying to reject the information. Why would I choose that name, I asked, more to myself than him. If I didn't remember, why that name? Logan reached out. His hand hovered near my shoulder. Maybe you didn't choose it, he said. His voice was thick with a hope that absolutely terrified me. Maybe you didn't choose it at all. Can't it be that maybe, just maybe, something inside you, some deep cellular part of your soul knew that was your real name all along? So, I stared at the photo on his phone screen until the pixels started to swim. The light from the device was harsh in the dim cab. It illuminated a version of me that hadn't been weathered by years of construction dust. The resemblance wasn't just uncanny. It was terrifyingly absolute. Like looking into a mirror that had been frozen in time. My mind was reeling. "This doesn't make any sense," I whispered. My voice sounded like gravel under a boot. If I had a family, a real family, wouldn't someone have reported me missing? Wouldn't there be a paper trail a mile long? I shifted my weight. The broken springs in the driver's seat groaned, as if in protest. "We were looking, Ezra," Logan said. His voice dropped an octave. It was thick with a grief that felt fresh and raw. "God, we never stopped looking. We spent years pouring money into private investigators, search teams, and police reports that went nowhere." The air in the taxi felt thick. It smelled of old upholstery and the metallic tang of my own rising panic. I gripped the steering wheel. "Then why didn't anyone find me?" I demanded. The unfairness of it all was bubbling up in my throat. I wasn't hiding. I was in a hospital for months, with tubes in my arms. My picture was probably in every local paper. Logan's face fell. He looked a decade older. "You were found 50 miles away in a completely different county," he explained. "Different police departments didn't talk to each other back then. Your case was a blip in a local rag, and we were looking for a boy who had disappeared from the city." He paused. His eyes dropped to his expensive leather shoes. "And our parents died in another car accident. 6 months after you vanished." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was in college, barely keeping my own head above water, while trying to settle in a state and keep a search alive. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy, wet wool blanket. "Your parents died?" I asked. The word "your" felt like a betrayal, even as I said it. "Our parents," he corrected gently. He locked eyes with me in the rearview mirror. "They were driving back from a meeting with another private investigator when it happened," he added. His voice was breaking. "They literally spent their final hours on this earth, trying to bring you home." Honestly, I felt something crack deep inside my chest. All those years I'd spent imagining parents who had abandoned me. And the truth was, they had died for the memory of me. I adjusted the rearview mirror. My hand was trembling so much, I knocked it out of alignment. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so incredibly sorry." Logan leaned forward. He briefly touched the back of my seat. "Don't apologize, Ezra. None of this, not the accident, not the silence, was your fault." The silence that followed was heavy. It was punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic on Market Street. Logan shifted. He reached into his coat pocket. "Ezra, do you remember anything? Even a fragment? A flash of light, or a specific sound from before the accident?" I closed my eyes. I tried to force my brain back into that dark room where those 17 years were locked away. "Sometimes I have these dreams," I admitted. "Just fragments. A woman's voice singing something low and sweet, the smell of chocolate cake cooling on a wire rack, a dog. I think. Something big and golden." I'd always told myself those were just hallucinations, my brain's desperate attempt to fill a vacuum. Logan's breath hitched. "Mom used to sing while she was in the kitchen," he whispered. "And we had a golden retriever named Buster. You used to sleep on the floor next to him every single night." A flash of something warm, matted fur flickered in my mind like a dying light bulb before vanishing. Maybe. I don't know," I said. I rubbed my temples where a dull ache was beginning to bloom. Logan pulled his wallet out and flipped it open. It showed 2 boys in puffer jackets, grinning like idiots while they tried to shove a carrot into a lopsided snowman's face. "Christmas, 1998, he said. "You were 16. I studied the boy in the photo, the version of me that hadn't seen the world fall apart. "I want to believe you," I said. My voice was barely audible. But what if this is just a fluke? What if I'm just some guy who happens to have the same eyes and the same name? Then we'll find out for sure, Logan said. His voice regained that executive ironclad certainty. DNA test. We'll go to a clinic. We'll get the swabs done. And we'll know definitively in a few days. I looked at him. This well-dressed stranger who was offering me a past I didn't remember. I felt hope. It was a terrifying, sharp-edged thing. Anyway, why were you in a taxi? I asked. The mundane question was a buoy in the middle of a tidal wave. You look like the kind of guy who has a driver on speed dial. Logan laughed. A short, dry sound. My car is in the shop, and the rideshare app kept crashing. If that glitch hadn't happened, if I just waited 5 more minutes. He shook his head. The what-ifs were clearly haunting him just as much as me. I looked at the meter. The red digital numbers were ticking upward. Your fare is going to be about $50 if we keep sitting here, I said. My old survival instincts were kicking in. I don't care about the fare, Ezra, Logan said. He waved his hand. Can I ask you something? Are you okay? The winter air bit through my flannel like a set of dull teeth. I realized what he was actually asking. I looked down at my wrinkled shirt and the gray towel I kept draped over the passenger seat to hide the duct tape. I'm between places right now, I said. The lie tasted like ash. The taxi thing is just a temporary gig until things stabilize. Logan's expression softened. It wasn't quite pity, but it stung just as much. You're homeless, he said. It wasn't a question. My silence was the only answer I had left. I'd spent 3 months perfecting the art of pretending, but he saw through it in seconds. It's not permanent, I snapped. The last shred of my dignity was flaring up. I'm working on it. I have a plan. Logan didn't flinch. Jesus, Ezra, how long? How long have you been living like this? I sighed. The fight was draining out of me. 3 months. Look, I don't need charity. I'm doing fine. It's not charity, if you're my brother, Logan said. His voice was firm, unyielding. And even if you're not, no one should be sleeping in a Crown Victoria. What do you want to do? I looked at his briefcase. Honestly, I wondered if there was a weapon or a contract inside that would make me wish I was back in the car. Why was he really doing this? Was this some elaborate identity theft ring? The paranoia clawed at me, even as Logan laid out the plan like a project manager. First, we get that DNA test, Logan said. Then, regardless of what the results say, we get you somewhere safe to stay while we figure out the next move. I can't afford to let you disappear again. I looked at him. My hand hovered over the door lock. I can't afford a hotel, Logan. Logan looked me straight in the eye. I can, he said simply. So, he didn't say it like a guy trying to flex his bank account. He said it like a man who had finally found the one thing he'd been saving for his entire life. He insisted on paying for a hotel room that night. Nothing over the top, just a clean suite with high thread count sheets and a shower that didn't require me to wear flip-flops. I spent a good 20 minutes just staring at the plush white mattress. I felt the weight of the last 3 months in my knees. I hadn't slept on an actual bed in what felt like a lifetime. The sheer luxury of being able to stretch my legs, it made me want to weep. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely human. Logan picked me up in a rental car that smelled like new leather and expensive silence. We drove to a private clinic tucked away in a sterile medical park. The air inside the clinic was heavy with the scent of rubbing alcohol. There was that hushed, expensive anxiety you only find in places where people pay for certainty. We did the cheek swabs and the paperwork. My hands were shaking just enough that the technician had to help me hold the pen. Results in 3 to 5 business days, the technician said. He handed us a receipt that felt as heavy as a death warrant. We walked back out to the parking lot. The morning sun was glinting off the rows of luxury SUVs. I adjusted my collar. I felt out of place in my wrinkled thrift store jacket. What do we do until then? I asked. I was terrified of the silence. I was terrified that if I went back to that hotel room alone, the last 24 hours would evaporate like a fever dream. We investigate, Logan said. His jaw was set in a hard line. I've kept everything, Ezra. Every police report, every scrap of paper, every dead-end lead from the last 2 decades is sitting in my office. He drove us toward the downtown district. Eventually, we pulled into the underground garage of a converted warehouse building. The lobby was all exposed brick and industrial lighting, the kind of place that screams success. His apartment was massive, a sprawling loft with ceilings so high they seemed to have their own weather system. It was a far cry from the cramped interior of my taxi. I stood by a floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out at the city skyline. A strange, hollow ache was blooming in my chest. "You've done well for yourself," I said. My voice echoed off the polished hardwood. Anyway, Logan didn't look around with pride. He looked tired, besides the inheritance. "I got lucky," he muttered. He tossed his keys onto a marble countertop. "Started a software company right out of college. Sold it 5 years ago for more money than I'll ever need. But Ezra, listen to me. If you are my brother, half of everything in this room, half of everything in my accounts, is yours. Our parents left us equal shares, and I've been holding on to yours for 25 years. I turned away from the view. My face was heating up. "I don't want your money, Logan. I'm not here for a payout." The thought of taking a cent from this man felt like admitting I was a charity case. I wanted a name, not a bank balance. "It's not my money, it's our money," he countered. His voice rose with a sudden intensity. "Our parents worked their entire lives to build something for their sons. Both of their sons. They would be devastated to know you were sleeping in a car while I was living like this." He led me toward the back of the loft, into a spare bedroom that had been converted into a high-tech office. In the corner, sitting like a silent tombstone, was a thick, well-worn, gray metal filing cabinet. It looked completely out of place against the sleek furniture. Its edges were scuffed. Its drawers were heavy with the weight of 1,000 secrets. "This is it," Logan said. His hand rested on the cold steel. "This is my search for you." Well, it was. I stopped actively looking about 5 years ago. I looked at the cabinet. A chill crept over my skin. "You stopped?" I asked. Logan sat down heavily in his desk chair. "I had to, Ezra. It was consuming me alive. I spent 20 years chasing ghosts. I blew through relationships because I was more interested in a lead in Ohio than the person sitting across the table from me." He opened the top drawer. The sound of metal sliding on metal was loud in the quiet room. Inside were rows of folders with labeled dividers. Asterisk police reports, private investigators, sightings, hospitals, asterisk. It was a physical manifestation of an obsession. "My therapist told me I was mourning a person who might not even exist anymore," he said softly. "I tried to move on. I locked this room and promised I'd never look back." He pulled out a map marked with dozens of red ink circles. Each one represented a place where a John Doe had been spotted. I traced the lines with my finger. I thought about Logan as a 19-year-old kid, mourning his parents and his brother all at once. "This must have been your entire life," I whispered. "It was," he admitted. His eyes were fixed on a newspaper clipping. "I nearly flunked out of college. I couldn't just move on, not when every time the phone rang. I thought it might be you." He pulled out a thick folder and began flipping through medical records. "I found this article years after the accident," he said. He handed me a photocopy. A 17-year-old male found unconscious beside Highway 94. Severe head trauma. The date matched the day the world went black for me. I read the cold description of my own broken body. I felt like I was reading an autopsy report for a stranger. "The PI I hired managed to get your hospital records," Logan said. His voice dropped to a low murmur. "Most of it was useless jargon. But then I found this." So, there was one thing I never told Jessica. One mark on my body that felt like a barcode I couldn't scan. I didn't know it yet, but that mark was about to prove I wasn't who I thought I was. Logan pointed to a line highlighted in yellow. "Asterisk patient has distinctive birthmark on left shoulder blade, approximately 2-inch crescent, shaped, asterisk. The room felt like it was starting to spin. The air was suddenly too thin to breathe. I reached over my shoulder. My fingers found the familiar, raised patch of skin through the fabric of my shirt. "You know about this?" I asked. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "I gave it to you," Logan said. For the first time, a real, tear-filled smile broke across his face. "You were 3. You were trying to ride my bike. I pushed you, just a little kid being a jerk, and you scraped your shoulder on the concrete. It healed in that exact crescent shape. Mom used to kiss it and say it looked like a little moon. I didn't even think. I just reached for the hem of my shirt and pulled it over my head." I turned my back to him in the middle of the office. The silence that followed was absolute. I could feel his gaze on my skin. Then, I heard a sharp intake of breath, a ragged, sobbing gasp. "Oh my God, Ezra," he choked out. His voice was thick with 25 years of relief. "That's it. That's exactly it." Anyway, I pulled my shirt back down. My hands were shaking so violently I had to shove them into my pockets. The silence in Logan's office was broken only by the hum of the air purifier. I didn't need a lab tech in a white coat. I already felt it in my gut. That crescent-shaped scar. It was a birthright I'd been carrying in the dark for 2 decades. The DNA results arrived 3 days later. It was a crisp, white envelope. We sat at Logan's marble kitchen island. The scent of espresso beans was hanging in the air. He slid the paper toward me, 99.97%. I wasn't just a guy who looked like a ghost. I was Ezra Westfield, a man with a bloodline, a history, and a brother who had spent half his life refusing to let me stay dead. "I need to know what happened," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. The who had been answered, but the how was a jagged hole in my head. Logan didn't hesitate. He'd already spent a small fortune on a woman named Detective Riley. She was a retired cold case specialist who looked like she chewed through steel for breakfast. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in Riley's office. It smelled of stale menthol cigarettes and old paper. She laid out a manila folder that contained the ending to a story I couldn't remember starting. "I found your driver," she said. She looked at me over the rims of her glasses. His name was Carl Brennan. He died 3 years ago. But the coward finally grew a conscience on his way out. I watched her lean back. Her chair creaked. She explained that Brennan had been driving drunk that night. He saw a 17-year-old kid walking along the highway in the rain and offered a ride. I must have been cold, naive enough to think a stranger was a better option than a 5-mile hike. 20 miles down the road, the world ended. Brennan lost control. The car rolled twice. He'd crawled out with nothing but a few bruises and a choice that would define the next 25 years of my life. He didn't call 911. He didn't check my pulse. He just ran. "He left me there," I said. The realization hit me like a physical punch. I felt a surge of pure, white-hot adrenaline. He'd gone home, reported his car stolen, and watched the news in silence. I lay in a charity ward with a shattered skull and no name. The son of a bitch lived a full life, while I was sleeping in a Crown Vic, eating gas station hot dogs, and wondering why the universe had deleted me. "Guilt is a slow poison," Riley said. Her voice was gravelly. He told his son everything on his deathbed. The kid's been sitting on that secret for 3 years, terrified of the fallout, until I knocked on his door. I felt a strange, hollowed-out kind of relief. The villain of my story was already in the ground. Logan was white-knuckling the edge of the desk. "What about the reports?" he spat out. "How did you miss a kid with a hole in his head 50 miles away?" Riley sighed. "Different counties, different filing systems, and a police department that assumed a missing teenager had just run off." So, we walked out of her office into a gray, drizzling afternoon. Logan drove in a heavy, brooding silence. I looked out the window at the blurred shapes of people living normal lives. I felt like an alien who had just been handed a map to a planet I didn't recognize. "How do you feel?" he asked. He pulled over near a park with a rusted swing set. "Empty," I admitted. I stared at a discarded soda can rolling across the pavement. I thought the truth would be this grand moment of clarity, but it's just sad. It was 25 years of suffering, all because one man was too much of a coward to face a DUI charge. My entire identity had been traded for a drunk driver's clean record. So, what now? I asked. I looked at my reflection in the window, the face of a man who was officially Ezra Westfield, but still felt like Ezra nobody. "We fix it," Logan said. He turned to face me with such fierce protectiveness I actually flinched. "We get you an apartment that doesn't have wheels. We fix your legal status. We get your name back on every document in this state." I looked at my hands. The calluses from years of construction labor were still thick. "I don't want charity, Logan," I said. My old stubborn pride was flaring up. I'd spent months convincing myself that I didn't need anyone. "It's not charity, it's family," he countered. His voice left no room for argument. "It's what our parents would have wanted. You've been a ghost long enough." He talked about we and ours, but all I could think about was the sheer audacity of the universe. Anyway, for 25 years, I'd been Ezra nobody, the guy with no past, no family, no safety net. I was used to the cold. I was used to being invisible. Now, I was being asked to step into the light. And honestly, the transition felt more terrifying than the darkness ever had. Can you actually become a brother again when you've spent half a lifetime being nothing at all? That question kept me awake for 3 nights. I lay there staring at the ceiling of the hotel room. I felt like a counterfeit bill that had somehow passed inspection. I had the name Ezra Westfield back, but I still felt like the guy who knew the exact price of a gas station corn dog. I'd gotten used to the sharp edges of being alone. I found a strange comfort in the fact that I didn't owe the world an explanation. But Logan, he wouldn't let me stay in that shell. He sat across from me in his living room. "You're not alone anymore, Ezra," he said. And he didn't just mean him. "Your kids, Ella and Ricky. They're my niece and nephew. They're family too." The idea hit me like a physical blow. I'd spent so much time mourning the life I lost that I hadn't even processed what this meant for the life I still had. My kids had grown up with a father who was a mystery. I gripped my plastic fork so hard it snapped. The crack echoed in the high-ceilinged room. "I hadn't thought of that," I whispered. My mind was suddenly flooded with images of my daughter's curls and my son's dirt-stained knees. For months, I'd been the dad who lived in a car. "Well, start thinking about it now," Logan said. His eyes were bright. "Because I want to meet them. I want to be the uncle who spoils them." 2 weeks later, I was standing in the parking lot of a generic family restaurant. The asphalt was radiating heat. I watched my brother pace beside his rental car. He was adjusting his collar, checking his reflection in the window every 30 seconds. It was the most human I'd ever seen him. "You're more nervous than I was on my first date," I said. A dry chuckle escaped my throat. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who owned a tech empire was terrified of an 8-year-old. Logan straightened his shirt for the 4th time. His hands were actually trembling. "I've never been an uncle before, Ezra. What if they don't like me?" I clapped a hand on his shoulder. "They're kids, Logan. Just give them some attention and maybe a few fries, and you'll be their hero." Just then, Jessica's silver SUV pulled into the lot. My heart did a slow, heavy roll. It was that familiar cocktail of love and deep regret. Ella bounced out of the car first. Her dark curls were escaping her ponytail. Ricky followed, moving with that cautious gait he had when he was unsure. "Daddy!" Ella screamed. I scooped her up. I breathed in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. For a second, the last 3 months didn't exist. I knelt down as Ricky approached. "Dad, who's that man?" he asked. His voice was small, suspicious. I felt a lump form in my throat. "Ricky, Ella, I want you to meet someone very special," I said. "This is your Uncle Logan. He's my brother." Ella's eyes went wide. "We have an uncle?" she asked. Logan didn't wait. He dropped down to their height on the hot asphalt. "You do now," he said. His voice was soft, incredibly gentle. "I've been looking forward to meeting you both for a very, very long time." Ricky stepped closer. He was squinting at Logan. "Dad said we don't have any family on his side," he challenged. He was still clutching a handful of smooth river stones. Logan didn't flinch. "Well, sometimes family finds you when you least expect it. What have you got there, partner?" Ricky opened his palm to reveal his treasure, 3 gray stones. Logan examined them with grave, focused attention. "These are incredible, you know. I used to collect rocks when I was exactly your age." Ricky's face lit up. "Really? Can I see them sometime?" Anyway, while Logan and the kids started debating the merits of granite, I caught Jessica's eye. She was leaning against her car, watching the scene. The ice had definitely melted. I walked over to her. The smell of her perfume hit me like a memory of a different life. "He seems wonderful," she said quietly. I knew this was sudden. The shift from homeless taxi driver to guy with a rich brother. "I know this is a lot," I said. "But Logan is. He's real. He's family. And he's insisted on sharing the inheritance. I can provide for them now, Jess." Real support. The relief on her face was almost painful to witness. "I want that too," she admitted. "They've been asking about you every single day. Ricky asked me last week if you were going to live in your car forever." I winced. The guilt was a sharp jab in my side. "I'm so sorry they had to see me like that." She smiled then, a genuine, tired smile. "Now they can have their father back," she said, "and they get an uncle who clearly already thinks they hung the moon." We stood there for a moment, finally breathing in the same rhythm again. We wouldn't ever be the couple we were, but we could be a foundation. Suddenly, Ricky came charging over. "Dad, Uncle Logan says he has a house with a big pool. Can we go swimming? Like, right now?" I looked at Jessica. She gave a small nod. "I think," she said, looking at Logan, "that Uncle Logan is going to spoil you both absolutely rotten." Logan grinned. In that moment, the resemblance between us was so sharp, it was like looking at a split-screen video. "That's the plan," he called out. His voice was booming with a joy I hadn't heard in years. "I have 25 years of uncle duties to catch up on, and I'm starting with double scoops of ice cream." Logan's voice carried over the sizzling sounds of the kitchen. It was a confident sound. As we walked through the glass doors, the smell of buttered popcorn and grilled onions hit me. I watched my kids scramble into a booth. Their faces were lit up by the neon open sign. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in a life I didn't deserve. So, 6 months later, I was standing in my own kitchen. I listened to the rhythmic hum of a brand new refrigerator. It wasn't a mansion, just a quiet 2-bedroom apartment. But it was mine. I poured a cup of coffee. I watched Logan pull into the parking lot for our ritual Saturday morning breakfast. It's weird how the brain works. The memories didn't just flood back in some dramatic montage. Instead, they arrived in tiny trickles, like a leaky faucet in a silent house. A certain slant of light would trigger a flash of my mother's apron, or Logan's specific laugh would suddenly taste like the summer of '96. I leaned against the counter. I traced the cool edge of the granite with my thumb. "I have news," Logan said the second he stepped through the door. He looked at me, his eyes bright. I felt that familiar prickle of what now? "The insurance settlement finally cleared," he said. He slid into a chair. "It wasn't about the money. It was about the acknowledgement. We had sued for the medical expenses and the 25 years of life that Carl Brennan had basically deleted with a bottle of whiskey." "It's enough to start over properly, Ezra," Logan whispered. He leaned over his mug. "You can do whatever you want now. No more yellow cabs. No more 12-hour shifts." I sat there staring at a small scratch on the wooden table. My mind was racing through 1,000 possibilities. I looked at him. I felt the weight of my new reality, a reality where I had choices. "I don't think I want to go back to construction," I said. The words felt surprisingly light. "I want to go back to school. I want to get my GED, and then maybe take some college classes." Logan's eyebrows shot up. "College? At 42, you're a glutton for punishment, aren't you? He was joking, but I could tell he was impressed. I smiled back. The expression felt less like a mask and more like a part of my actual face. I want to study social work, I told him. The idea had taken root during those long, freezing nights in the taxi. I keep thinking about all the people I met on the streets, the ones who didn't have a Logan to find them. I spent 25 years falling through the cracks. I figure I'm uniquely qualified to help pull people out of them. Logan reached across the table. He squeezed my shoulder. You'd be incredible at that, he said. His voice dropped the humor. You understand the cost of being invisible. We sat in that comfortable silence, the kind of silence you can only have with someone who knows exactly where your scars are. Anyway, later that afternoon, I drove my old taxi out to the cemetery. I'd kept the car, mostly because I wasn't ready to let go of the thing that had actually brought my brother to me. The graveyard was quiet. The air smelled of cut grass. I walked between the rows of headstones until I found the name Westfield. I sat cross-legged on the grass between my parents. I felt the dampness seep into my jeans. I got my study guide today, I told the silent air. I felt a little ridiculous. Logan thinks I'm a nerd for wanting to do homework at my age, but I figure I've got a lot of catching up to do. A light breeze rustled the trees. It sounded almost like a sigh of approval. I wish I could remember the sound of your voices, I whispered. My throat was tightening, but Logan tells me stories. Sometimes, it feels like remembering. He says Mom used to sing while she cooked. He says you never gave up looking for me, even when the cops told you I was a goner. I stayed there until the sun started to dip. I felt a sense of completion. Honestly, I'm not a ghost anymore. I'm Ezra Westfield, a man who survived the dark and found his way back to the light, because one person refused to stop looking. As I walked back to my taxi, I realized that the longest journeys don't always take you across the world. Sometimes, they just take you back to the name you were always supposed to have. Anyway, if you've ever felt like you were losing your way, or if you're still waiting for someone to find you, just know that hope is a stubborn thing. What's the longest you've ever searched for something that mattered? Tell me your story in the comments, because sometimes sharing the weight makes it easier to carry. If this story of second chances moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell so you're here for the next one.